This is my collection of computer and video game system platforms and consoles. Part 1 is the consoles. Atari 2600, Atari 7800 Pro System, Mattel Intellivision, Magnavox Odyssey 2, Atari 400 home computer, Atari 800 XL home computer. This is a Yobo Gameware. This is made by Yobo, and it's a NES clone system that plays Nintendo Entertainment System games. My Nintendo Entertainment System is actually in storage. It's actually sealed in plastic. That's to keep it in good shape. Atari Jaguar without the CD. Sega Genesis CD and 32X all put together. You notice what a ugly behemoth that thing turns out to be when you do all that. TurboGrafx 16, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Sega Master System 2, GCE Vectrix. This was a system that sold in the early 80s, right about the time the video game crash, that has its own screen. It is a vector graphics screen. Panasonic 3DO, Sega Saturn. Now this Saturn has been regionally modified. It's been modded to play Japanese Sega Saturn games, as well as the American Atari Jaguar with the CD attachment. As you see, it forms like a gigantic toilet lid looking thing there. This is the Pro Controller, by the way. Sega Genesis again with a 32X attachment. Nintendo 64. Nintendo Family Computer, or Famicom. This system came out in 1983, 2 years before the American version known as the NES, or the Nintendo Entertainment System, hit in this country. Nintendo Super Famicom. Again, it's like the Super NES in this country. JVC XI. I don't know how well you can see, that's kind of dark in that corner there. But this is a Sega CD system with a cartridge. It's got a cartridge port there and a CD ROM there, all in one setup. These are kind of rare. Microsoft Xbox with wireless apparatus. Ooh, look, Nintendo Wii. Of course, the Wii tracking. We got the Kinect here. We got the Move camera here. This is the redesign of the Xbox 360. This is the redesign of the Sony PS3. The Xbox 360, I still have one of the original ones, but it too is sealed and in storage. I want it to be the last working Xbox 360. It has its first generation. It doesn't even have an HDMI port out. This is a Japanese Sony PlayStation 1. Okay, what this is, it looks exactly like an American PlayStation 1, but it's NTSC-J. And here's one of the original controllers. It doesn't have the sticks on it here. Nintendo GameCube with has two Wavebird connections there. Sony PS1, the redesign of the PlayStation 1. Sony PS2, the redesign of the PlayStation 2. Sony PS3. This is the original PS3. This came out at launch with 60 gigabytes on it, which is really nothing as far as memory is concerned anymore. Sega Dreamcast. NEC PC Engine. I showed you the TurboGrafx earlier. This is the Japanese version of TurboGrafx. Notice how much smaller it is. Here's my hand in comparison to it. My hand completely covers it. It's extremely small. And these are kind of rare as they were never sold in this country, just like the Famicom and the Super Famicom. Oh, Sony PS1 with screen attached. These are also kind of a trip. You can take this anywhere. I could plug this into my car if I really wanted to. Okay, now we're on to the handhelds, and there's only one proper way to do the handhelds, and that is to bang down through the list of the Nintendo handhelds first. So we start with the original Nintendo Game Boy, Nintendo Game Boy Pocket, still has a pea green screen. It is smaller than the original. Nintendo Game Boy Color. Okay, there's that. Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Alright. Looks like a familiar design there, right? Nintendo Game Boy Advance SP. Right here, this is actually the collector's edition of the NES version. It looks kind of like a Nintendo Entertainment System in NES. Sort of. I never thought that it really did that much, but they say it's supposed to. Nintendo DS Fat. That's why they call it Fat, because it's big. It's a foldable brick. Here's what it looks like closed. Big old stupid clam. Nintendo DS Lite. There's that. It has the cartridge port down there. Card port up here. Simple, basic. Oh, Nintendo Game Boy Pocket. Very small. Smallest video game system in the world, actually. Smaller than most cell phones. Got a little bit of dust on the screen there. Oh, well, that's gone. I get skulls on that guy. Nintendo DSi. And this is every iteration of the Nintendo handhelds. Here we go. Nintendo DSi XL. Same thing as a DSi, only larger. This one I stuffed with a card that has a gig on it. Some more obscure handhelds here. This is a SNK Neo Geo Pocket. Doesn't even have crosshair controls. It just has this stick. You can hear it clicking there, and two buttons. Pretty cool thing. This is a Wonder Swan. Gunpei Yokoi, I think that's his name, the guy father of the Game Boy, when he quit Nintendo, or was actually fired. It was like a fired quit type thing. He started this company. It's a handheld. These are sold only in Japan. This is a Wonder Swan Color. Okay, same company, the Wonder Swan. I guess they're called Wonder Swan. They made this as well. This was the color upgrade, also sold only in Japan. Not in this one. This is an Atari Lynx. This, I believe, is... they had two designs of this. I'm not sure which one this one is. I think it's the second design. One thing that Atari did very well, has these rubber grips back here. One thing Atari did very well was they made their systems durable. The Jaguar, for example, has full-blown roll cage underneath the plastic. This is a Sega Game Gear. This was had a color screen. It was to take on the Nintendo Game Boy. Of course, it did not do too well. It didn't have the battery life, and it was a chump. Kind of like the Atari Lynx. It was a chump. It's just a big thing. It's a little bit too big to be considered truly portable. You cannot stick it in a pocket. This is a TigerGame.com. Actually, it's a Tiger Game.com. A lot of people call it Game.com, but it's not a Game.com. It's Tiger Game.com. It actually has a touch screen here. Okay, there's a stylus right here. And, you know, before the DS came out, there was this different kind of very primitive touchscreen technology. You can't see it here, but if you look really close, like stick your face like right up against the screen, you can see that there are little tiny little dots arranged in a grid to let it know. This thing could actually hold 2 games at the same time. You could switch between the two. It had a calendar, you know, a phone number, you know, little database type thing. And these had a black and white screen. Okay, this is a Sega Nomad. Okay, and what is a Sega Nomad? It has 6 buttons. You know, your start and mode buttons here, controller over on the other end there. This played full-sized Sega cartridges. Full-size Sega cartridges. It was a portable Sega Genesis, basically. It even has a slot there for a second controller. And where is it here? There is a proprietary not composite, but proprietary AV out that you could connect to a TV. So basically, this was a portable Genesis that you could connect to a TV and have 2-player games. And of course, all of these handhelds come with some manner of AC adapter / charger type thing. They didn't have. They made a charger for this. You see, there's like a, maybe you can see the slot on the back there that this thing. It was a chump that this thing slid into, but it's most fun just plugged in and used. Okay, here we have a Sony PSP. Oh, we all know about that. It plays these UMD movies, which bombed miserably. They were an abysmal failure. And the discs, the game discs that they make for this also didn't really catch on. They're going to be releasing their new PSP system with 2 sticks, a lot more power, and they will be using little cards similar to what the Nintendo DS uses versus these UMD discs. This is a Westminster 256 games in one handheld unit. This little device utilizes small pixel-like dot things to make different shapes. It can be a Space Invader looking thing, or it can be you know, like a football looking thing, or various different kinds of shooters and snake games and things like that. Things that you would find on like old cell phones or something when they first started making games for cell phones. Back when cell phones still had like black and white screens. Here we go. This is a Mattel Classic Basketball handheld system. Just plays basketball. It uses these little light up diode type things here to simulate basketball. Never really cared for sports much. My brother had one of these when we were kids. I found this at a local outdoor sale. It was $5, so I picked it up. Mattel made it. Okay, this is a Sega Dreamcast VMU. If you see or notice the controller thing here and these 2 little buttons. This also downloaded from some of the Sega Dreamcast games. It was able to pick up little like mini games that they included for these things on some of the Sega Dreamcast games. Little snake games and cell phone looking games, again from the early days of the cell phone. This also allowed you, when you played Sonic Adventure, or I think any of the Sonic Adventure games on the Dreamcast, you could download your Chow onto here, and they became like a Gigapet, where you fed them and trained them and stuff like that. Then you could put them back into the game, the Sonic game that you took them from, and they'd be more powerful, and for like the races and things like that on the game, they would be faster then. And these just slid into these controllers like so. This is a Game Boy. No, a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. This is a Game Boy player. With that attached to your GameCube, you could play your Game Boy games, any Game Boy games, through your GameCube onto the big screen. This is a Japanese Super Game Boy. This would go into the Nintendo Super Famicom, like so. And then you put your games in there, into that little slot there. This also plays American games, not just Japanese Game Boy games. Okay, this is an American Super Game Boy. This also plugged into the Super NES, and you could play your Game Boy games on here as well, same thing. Okay, this precious little gem here is a Nintendo Virtual Boy. Nintendo Virtual Boy. Gunpei Yokoi, again, the guy who I told you earlier started WonderSwan. There's a reason why he started WonderSwan, and he worked for Nintendo. He made the Game Boy. He made the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. Well, no, he didn't make the Game Boy Advance. He actually got canned before the Game Boy Advance, because before the Game Boy Advance came along, there was this 32-bit virtual helmet type thing. It's not what it sounds like. It had red and black screen. The effect, the visual effect, the 3D effect is more like a Viewmaster, if anybody remembers the old Viewmasters. It gives you the illusion of 3D because it shows you one image in one eye and another image in another eye, and it uses mirrors and things like that. It's very cheap effect to pull off, and this thing bombed miserably for Nintendo. I had a controller here, you know, and the games were things like this. You know, those little card things that fit into a slot here. This is an iPod Touch, 8 gig. The 3G, actually this was considered 2.5G because it only had 8 gig, but I don't need a lot of memory. I just back this stuff up on a couple of computers. You know, one's a laptop, so I always have this stuff portable anywhere I go. And this is not a very good game system. I wouldn't really compare this to something like a DSi or a PSP, but it does you know, an adequate job at certain kinds of games. Okay, this little thing here is a PowerJoy. I'm not sure what company made this. I know that they're made in Brazil. They were made in Brazil. You see it has a light gun thing on the end there for light gun games. It has a trigger under here, full array of buttons, analog stick, although I don't know how analog that actually is. I think it might be a digital stick, just pushes a button when you tilt the stick that way. Maybe it is analog, I don't know. This has built-in games. Most of them are light gun type games. But if you look in the back here, there is a cartridge bay for standard Famicom, the Japanese NES games right there. And underneath here is a second controller port for two-player games. Again, this connects to a TV and you're off and running. Pretty interesting little device. You know, people often ask me or say to me, you know, why do you collect that old junk? And my answer is, it's not really old junk. It's old junk now. But when it came out, it wasn't old junk. It was actually quite, any of these systems at the time they came out, they all had something to say. They were all, you know, high tech, basically. There was planning behind all of them. There was a team behind all of them. And there was a lot of money put into them. And there, you know, the strategy behind every single one of them, all of them have something to say. And that's why I collect them, because they're all interesting. You can have your computers with your emulators and do all that like that, and play your old games that way. That's all fine and well and good. I prefer to have the original systems with the original games. Now, I don't mind blowing on cartridges and things like that to get things to work. It's okay. It comes with the territory. Hope you enjoy. You know, anytime I do this, I'm almost always bound to miss something. This is a Retro Mini, and what this device does is it plays NES, standard NES cartridges. They go in the top here, in this little bay right here. This also connects to a TV. It does not have a second controller port or anything anywhere on it. But that's what that is, another handheld. And now I think I'm done with everything. And now I can say I hope you enjoyed.